Good evening. Welcome to the book launch and the celebration for Hello Beautiful, Get Well Soon, When Hope and Healing Are on the Other Side, written by yours truly, Gigi Gilliard. I want to thank you for being with us tonight, whether you are in the room, because we are here live in person having what I'm calling a supper reading. Now, ain't nobody eating supper. We're not eating supper yet. But we are going to have some small tapas and some light fare and some libation. And I want to tell you this. If I could, I would have invited so many more of you. But unfortunately, that was not to be the case. Nonetheless, you are welcome here. You are welcome with me, and I don't take your presence for granted, whether you are watching online on a social media platform like Facebook or YouTube or even LinkedIn. And I certainly don't take your presence for granted if you are in our VIP Zoom room. So if you're in that VIP Zoom room, welcome. I know that you have been warmly greeted by my colleague, Aisha Parker. So with that, the way that I wanted to start tonight was to first state the occasion. Many of you know that I'm a sorority girl, and sorority girls love to state the occasion. We love to tell you exactly what it is that we're doing. And I wanted to talk a little bit about why I wrote this book and why I wrote this book so quickly after the last book. And I also wanted to tell you a little bit about who I wrote the book for. I'm hoping that many people would be able to find the stories useful and to be able to glean something from what I wrote, but there was a specific audience that I had in mind when I wrote. So let me start with that. I want to start with that. Number one, there is a woman that I follow in my work. And many of you know that for a living, my day-to-day job, I am a corporate trainer, right? That's I think the official title. I run a small consultancy where we focus on solutions and strategies as it relates to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. We help organizations figure out whether or not their organization is inclusive or not, why they aren't inclusive, and how we can help with that. That's our day-to-day work. A couple of years ago, I stumbled upon, and I really didn't stumble upon it, this book was actually recommended to me by another colleague, a book that was written by a black woman, a black PhD, by the name of Dr. Mary Frances Winters. And Dr. Winters wrote this book called Black Fatigue. And in it, she talks about how black fatigue is this phenomenon, is this sort of feeling of really sort of our mind and our body and our spirit being put upon because we're black and brown in America. And when you think about verdicts that we saw yesterday and things that happened like the murder of Mr. Floyd, the murder of Breonna Taylor, and so many decades of bigotry and discrimination, of course there is this sense of black fatigue. And Dr. Mary Frances Winters talks about how this sense of black fatigue wears on us from a mental and an emotional perspective. But also, what wears on us from a mental and an emotional perspective is just trauma. Trauma that happens in our childhood, trauma that happens because of loss of life, trauma that happens because of loss of relationships, maybe loss of job, and maybe other things that have gone on in our lives that have caused deep and lasting hurts. Like many of you, like many in this room, I have experienced some deep and lasting hurts. And let me just say this, I'm not in any way, shape, or form interested in participating in pain Olympics, right? My situation is worse than your situation, my pain is worse than your pain. That's not why I'm here, not at all, because I know, and the reason I say that, I know for a fact that many of you have been through our work. You've experienced far more loss. My issue, and one of the reasons why I wrote the book, is because I realized that as I started to uncover these places where I had experienced trauma, that I had deep pain, I realized also that I needed to get help. That I needed to get help from mental health professionals, from someone who could help me sort of unpack all that stuff so that I could get well. But I didn't want to do that at first. And not only did I not want to do that, I didn't think I needed to. I was like, I'm good, okay? I'm real good. I'm a consultant. I run my own business. I'm doing all right. but I was not doing all right. I was not doing all right by a long shot. And so it was my intention when I came up with this title, or when I believe the title was given to me, to share some of those stories. And let me say a word about stories. In our work in diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, one of my colleagues, Aisha Parker, those of you who were in the Zoom room, you met her. In our facilitation, we use storytelling. We tell stories a lot. And the reason for that is because it is better to share a story to help make a point or help illuminate something for our clients than rather tell them, you should do this or you should do that. That's not helpful. Nobody wants that. But there's something about the power of story. There's something about hearing, hang on, somebody else has gone through this thing. Maybe that thing that this person experienced, I can relate to. And in so relating and in so thinking about that, really sort of find your own path to healing. And that is what I was hoping for. I didn't tell all the stories, right? Because my mama would put me out, right? She would put me out. But I did tell some stories that I thought were salient, that I thought were germane, not just to Black women, but germane to women in general. So that's why I wrote the book, and that's who I wrote the book for, specifically for Black and brown women who have struggled with trauma and hurt and loss and have not gotten help, but have thought, maybe I should, or maybe need a little prodding. I don't want to prod. I don't want to push. I want to be able to tell my stories and have somebody glean something from it. So that's the who and the why. Now, one of the things that I was going to do this evening before we do a short reading, in just a couple minutes, I'm going to do a very short reading from the book. One of the things that I wanted to do was answer some questions about, the book itself and just the self-publishing industry and all that kind of stuff. But I'm not going to do that. And the reason I'm not going to do that is because something happened today that I think is more germane to the story. And I think it's probably more authentic to what's happening. So I have a lot of therapists now, right? I have a lot of coaches, I have a lot of therapists. I went from having none to a few. And I actually have a coach in my writing. Now, I have a senior editor who I want to introduce to you in a little bit. His name is Lorenz Brown. But outside of Lorenz, I have some folks in the publishing industry who have taken notice and have given me some advice along the way. And one of those coaches said, you know what, G, you need a signature. And I was like, a signature outside of Gigi Gilliard? Because that sounds like a great writer name to me. And she says, no, like a signature look, something about you as an author that people will be like, when we see that, we know that that's Gigi. So I decided that my signature look would be bedazzling my sneakers. I wanted to bedazzle my sneakers. I wanted to go out on my own, I wanted to go out on my own and from Amazon, buy some half pearls and half jewels, and I wanted to make my sneakers sort of match the theme tonight. So I did that. If you picked up the book, on the back of the book, I'm sort of sitting or half laying on a chaise, and in that picture, you see those sneakers that I bedazzled in the book, in the back of the book. I was very proud of that, right? Those sneakers cost me $11, but I spent a lot of time bedazzling, right? And I thought, all right, this will be my signature. So then I spoke to my publishing coach, and I said, here's the thing. I can't wear those sneakers with what I want to wear to the launch. I want to wear black. I want to look chic and all that. I can't wear the sneakers. And she goes, so go out and get some black shoes and bedazzle your shoes. I said, I see. Okay, sure. I could do that. So I went out, and I bought a very expensive pair of black shoes. They were fabric, because they had to be fabric so that the bedazzled glue, right, would stick to the fabric. And while running my consultancy, and I think we're up to about 15 clients, running the consultancy, right, trying to be a halfway good daughter and niece and cousin, and writing a book. In the middle of the night, I was bedazzling my shoes, right, because I wanted to have a signature. Well, today, as we were getting ready to come here to spend time with you all, and I was moving things from my home out on the sidewalk so that we can bring them here to the venue. In the course of that, somebody stole the bag that had my shoes in the bag. They stole my signature shoes that I wore in the back of the book, and they stole these very expensive shoes that I bedazzled in the middle of the night, and a few other items. It happened really quickly. And one of the things that I did want to share about the publishing industry is that nothing ever goes right. Nothing ever goes right. We had some typos in our first book. So I said, okay, this go round, we won't do that. We're going to get proofreaders. I have this very fancy senior editor, Lorenz, that I mentioned to you. We had the book proofread. Then we got the final version back just a few days ago. And lo and behold, there were some typos. But by that time, the book had hit the printer already. The printer had them. So I called the printer and I said, there's no way that you guys are going to be able to print me clean books for my event. And they were like, sure, we can do it. We can do it for you. I couldn't believe it. And there were some other things along the way in this process that never happened, that happened almost magically. So today, at some point, I thought to myself, something is going to happen. I didn't want to be cynical. I didn't want to think negative. I didn't want to bring that energy in, but I did think that. And I thought, you know what, G, if it does happen, what difference does it make? You have a book, you have friends, you have people coming on Zoom, you have people coming online. Everything will be fine. Well, by the time that I got to the venue tonight, I felt this well of emotion. All of this anger, all of this frustration, all of this sadness. And I couldn't understand what was happening because, it's just shoes, right? It's just shoes. But I really wanted to wear my signature shoes tonight. And I had a meltdown, a big one. I wasn't very nice to my team. And guys, I'm very sorry. I could feel myself panicking. And this is not unfamiliar to me. These feelings of panic and these feelings of unwellness. I thought to myself, this is the very thing that I wrote about in the book. This is the very thing. What was going on tonight was not about my shoes. Let me just be honest. It was not about my shoes. It's about, I don't know, maybe insecurity, maybe wanting to look good, maybe wanting things to be perfect. I'm not sure. Yesterday, I was super stressed. I was on the phone with a good friend yesterday, and I talked to them about how stressed out I was yesterday because I wanted everything to be just so. And things are not always just so. They're not. But because of this well of unwellness that lives right underneath the surface, because of just past things, past hurts or past times, maybe past bosses, maybe past situations where I felt less, where I didn't feel good enough, where I felt like I was being judged in a hypercritical way. Now, let me just explain something to you. I know everybody's judging, right? Everybody's judging. I get that. Everybody judges. That's fine, right? But that has had an effect on me. So while I was going to do this whole Q&A thing, my dear colleague Aisha and another good friend said, this is probably the thing you should share. And they were right, because tonight, in the process of wanting to tell you about a book that I wrote about having panic attacks, I had a panic attack. It don't get better than that. So I'm going to do my best to put my shoes behind me, but I'm going to continue on with the therapy that I receive. And I want to encourage you, if you need it, if you have unresolved hurts and pains and things that may brim to the surface, I want to encourage you to get the help that you may need as well. So having said all of that, I promised that I wasn't going to keep everybody long. I do want to do a brief reading. And what I'm going to read from this particular story, so this is a nonfiction book, so everything that's in here happened. I have changed some names to protect the not-so-innocents. But for large part, the stories are real. And one of the things that happened, I want to say this was like early aughts, like the early 2000s or so. I had made a decision very reluctantly that I was going to get help. And I went to the employee assistance program at my job, and I got introduced to this young man named Joey. Now, Joey was a young white guy. He was about, I don't know, he looked like he was 20-something to me. I was like, really, Doogie Howser? It's Doogie Howser, right? But Joey was amazing. He was a licensed clinical social worker, and he was not going to be my therapist, but he was going to be my guide. Joey was trying to help me find a therapist. And he had a hard time convincing me, but finally I gave in, and we started this process of me finding a therapist. The very first therapist that I went to, things did not work out. I'm going to leave the story to you to read in the book. Where I pick up in the story right now is Joey and I deciding that I was going to see somebody else. And I want to read for you really briefly what happened. So bear with me one second while I find my place, and I will read this for you. So remember, Joey and I are talking about me getting help and me not backing away from getting help. Excuse me one second. While I find my place. Okay, here we go. The next day, I spoke to my boy Joey and recounted the visit from the day before. I tried really hard not to laugh until Joey burst out laughing. Keeping it real, Gigi, he said, you know I shouldn't laugh, and I'm not laughing at this lady, the other therapist. And I'm not laughing at her situation, but the irony is that we have finally convinced you to go and see someone and you do the counseling. So I counseled this lady. I went in, the lady had a breakdown, right? And I was like, baby, you okay? How can I help you? What kind of strategies can we come up with together, right? So that's actually what happened. The very first time I go to see a therapist, I end up counseling her. So Joey says, but the irony is that we have finally convinced you to go and see someone and you do the counseling. That experience is the stuff of a sitcom. Or maybe it's the stuff of a good book. Joey and I talked again over the next couple of days and determined that I would go to the next option on our list. Hanging in there, I was determined to begin the process all over again. I reached out to the professional and set up a meeting this time. This provider was a much older white man, and it was clear that he had extensive experience in counseling and treating patients. I was surprisingly not concerned about race or gender. I only say that because there was a point where I thought that I would feel more comfortable with a black woman therapist. This time, it didn't faze me one way or the other. I was concerned, however, whether or not this gentleman had experience with single people. I had been single for a long time. I felt like processing my relationship trauma was key to my healing. After asking him a series of questions, I felt satisfied, and I planned to go see him. His offices were swanky. I love that. There was a lovely waiting area outside his office suite, tons of good magazines, and even a few good book titles. There was soft music playing in the foyer, but it wasn't cheesy elevator music. The music was more like smooth jazz with some songs in rotation that had an upbeat tempo every couple of songs. Nice touch with the music, I thought. I got into his expensive-looking office, and I immediately noticed his wealth. There were fancy rugs, there was a beautiful leather couch, beautiful pillows, a gorgeous mahogany desk, beautiful, expensive-looking paintings, and lots of lush green plants. His name was Elliot. Elliot came from behind his desk and ushered me to a sitting area he had set up for us to talk. He offered me a seat on the couch, and right across from me, he set up a recliner chair where he sat. It had a deep back and a high headrest. Comfy, I thought. As Elliot and I began the conversation, it had some of the same elements as the conversation I had had with the previous therapist. He asked me a lot about my parents, my childhood, my siblings, my birth order, and some other context and background questions. He finally asked, so Gigi, tell me what brought you here today. Now, y'all know I could talk. And if I feel comfortable, I will start my story at the beginning of creation and take you through the end of the world. Truthfully, I wasn't thinking that I should make my stories to the therapist concise because I wanted him to know exactly who I was. However, to my chagrin, after I had been speaking for a bit, I realized that Elliot's eyes were closed. Shut. I mean, I never saw him blinking or try to hold his eyes. found a therapist, and right now, I mentioned this sort of tongue-in-cheek, right now I have 4 therapists. I do. One who helps me with my past trauma and grief syndrome and things like panic attack. I have another coach and another therapist who helps me in my professional life, being an entrepreneur and getting in front of white people as much as I do, because that's a thing. I have another therapist who focuses solely on my relationships, because I might need some help with my relationships. And so I say that to say that I am hoping that some of the stories that I share in Hello Beautiful, Get Well Soon will encourage you, will inspire you. If you pick up the book, you'll find out why I came up with this title. It was very intentional. And I'm hoping that what you heard tonight, I'm hoping as I shared with you the reason for the story, it will inspire you to buy the book on your own. Thank you so much for being with us. What's happening? Some mic. And what is the time check? I just want to check the time. 8:30. Thank you. Thank you. One of the things that I wanted to do was give out a prize to our folks online while my sister's doing that. And the prize that I wanted to give to our folks online was to the first person who bought a book this morning. And that person happens to be my line sister. Her name is Bridget Lewis Burgess. She's not Burgess anymore, Bridget Lewis. She was the first person to buy a book this morning. And so, Bridge, I'm going to make sure that you get a very, very special gift. I have your address. I'm going to make sure you get that from me. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you so much to everybody for your support. Those of you who have bought the book, those of you who are going to go tonight and buy the book, right? I love that you're going to go tonight and buy the book. You'll be able to find the book on Amazon in Kindle form and also in paperback form as well. So with that, everyone, I want to thank you for being with us online, whatever platform you watched us in. I'm going to let you go. I didn't want to keep you on your Saturday night. I'm sure that there were other things you could have been doing. And I want to thank you so much for just allowing me to be vulnerable. Have a great night, and thank you again.